Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." The disciples left and went into the city and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. Good evening and blessed Maundy, Thursday to you. I hope this evening finds you well. I hope it is a festive evening for you so far, because that's what it's meant to be. Our Jewish brothers and sisters celebrated the Passover last night. It was the night where, when the sun went down, the woman of the house lit a candle and they celebrated together. This is an important time. Maundy, Thursday. Monday. It's a weird name, and it's not to be confused with Monday. It is Latin for mandate, because this is the night in which Jesus mandates to his followers to do certain things. If you're reading from the book of Mark, which is what I'm doing tonight, or Matthew or Luke, he mandates the Last Supper. Take this bread. Remember me every time you eat it. Take this wine. Remember me every time you drink it. If you're reading the book of John, he mandates that his disciples be servants, that they wash one another's feet. And what you need to understand is there's nothing more humbling than having to wash someone's feet. Think about it. You're out walking around on these streets where camels and donkeys have trod, and you're wearing sandals. Your feet are going to be gross. They're going to be sweaty, and they're going to be covered in all sorts of stuff. So the servant, the lowest servant of the house, was the one who washed feet. They were so low often that you never even acknowledged their humanity. You just let them wash your feet the same way you let your dishwasher wash your dishes, or your washing machine wash your clothes, or your vacuum do your floor. You get it. So when Jesus in the book of John takes off his robe and ties a servant's towel around his waist and washes his disciples' feet, he said, "If I can be the lowest of servants, what do I expect you as my followers to be to one another?" This is what Jesus mandates, that we remember him in everything we do, in the daily occurrence of bread at meals, of wine with family and friends, and servanthood to one another. That is what this mandate is about. But Maundy, Thursday was Passover. And Passover for the Jews is something amazing. It is the very celebration of freedom. We as Americans totally get this. July 4th, we celebrate our freedom. Passover is more than that, though, because it's a liberation day. Think about Thanksgiving and Christmas and 4th of July and Super Bowl all wrapped into one, and you pretty much got a start as to what Passover is for our Jewish brothers and sisters. It is a celebration where you have the freedom to sit with your family and be. A celebration of being liberated from slavery, where you have the opportunity to kick back at the table and eat leisurely as we remember what God has done for us and how God has taken us out of slavery, out of bondage, into freedom. And yet Passover is also a call to action, that we help others become free. One of the things that is often shared at Passover is a little introduction that goes something like this. The Passover meal is an ancient celebration of the Jews' release from Egyptian bondage. The meal is called Seder, which means order, as in the order of worship. The night before he was crucified, Jesus shared the Passover Seder with his disciples. The Seder is a living experience of freedom. It is a renewal of life and of values. May the words and the events of this Seder, taken from the language of flesh and blood, from physical and material reality, be a gateway for you to experience movement from death and bondage to life and freedom. By eating together and sharing conversation, we remember God's continuing mighty gift of freedom and life. So this evening, celebrate and enjoy, and be aware that in sharing these common experiences, we are worshiping. This is part of what we traditionally do as a faith community here at St. John's with our Seder supper. Tonight is a night where we would currently be about an hour into our meal together. But it's a different year, isn't it? Where there is a plague going across the land, where there is a plague going around the world. It is a different year where we are sheltering in place for our safety, but really for the safety of those who are more susceptible to what this disease can do. You'll realize that what you're currently doing tonight is very similar to the first Passover. And part of what the Jews would celebrate at a Passover meal, like Jesus was doing with his disciples, is remembering what happened. And so into the meal they read from the book of Exodus. This is from Exodus chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month they are to take a lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. And if a household is too small for a whole lamb, it shall join its closest neighbor in obtaining one. The lamb shall be divided in proportion to the number of people who eat it. The lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slaughter them at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted over the fire with its head, legs, and inner organs. You shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. This is how you shall eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human beings and animals. On all of the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. Throughout your generations you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance." Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go, select your lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and touch the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood in the basin. None of you shall go outside of the door of your house until morning. For the Lord will pass through to strike down the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts of your house, the Lord will pass over that door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your house to strike you down. You shall observe this rite as a perpetual ordinance for you and your children. And when you come to the land that the Lord will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this observance. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this observance? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. For he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck down the Egyptians, but spared our houses. And the people bowed down and worshipped, and the Israelites went and did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and all of the firstborn of the livestock. Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all of his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, rise up, go away from my people, both you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone. Bring a blessing on me too. This is what was read by Jesus as the rabbi sitting at this meal in this upper room, celebrating this Passover that had at this point been celebrated for 1,000 years. Some while they were free as Israelites living in their land. Some while they were wandering through the wilderness. Some as captives in Babylon or Assyria. But it was celebrated every year as a remembrance that God delivers. So Jesus sat there with his disciples. And there he celebrated the Passover in this upper room. And just for the record, it wasn't like Da Vinci drew with him and 12 guys. There's probably 60 to 120 people in this room, because the rabbi would have his family, so his mother would be there. And then you'd have the families of all of his disciples, so Peter's wife would be there, probably his mother-in-law. There would be lots of people in this room. And one person would get up and leave this party, this celebration, and he would head out to betray Jesus. But before he does, he eats the meal with Jesus. While they were eating the Passover Seder, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, take and eat, this is my body. Then, after supper, after giving thanks, he took the cup and gave all of them to drink from it and said, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be distressed and agitated, and he said to them, I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here with me, and keep awake. And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want. He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Enough. The hour has come, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. All of the disciples deserted Jesus and fled. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the other chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I don't know or understand what you're talking about." And he went out into the forecourt. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while, bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to curse and swore an oath, "I do not know this man that you're talking about." At that moment, the rooster crowed for the second time. And Peter remembered Jesus said to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter broke down and wept. Tomorrow night, we continue our story by following Jesus as he carries his cross at 7 p.m.